Sam Kahn, our buddy from theathletic.com. And Sam, the Ryder Lions signing with Under Armour deal, I'm sure you just heard us talking about how that'll kind of set up BYU moving forward, but how cool is it to just see guys signing with Under Armour or signing some of these big deals for all the hand-wringing about NIL? I think it would have been so cool back in our day when we were younger to see, I mentioned like a Peter Warwick or an Adrian Peterson signing with a Nike or an Adidas. Do you find that cool, or is that just me?
Yeah, no, it is interesting. Could you imagine what kind of apparel deal Johnny Manziel could have netted when he was at Texas A&M? Like he would have had everybody coming after him. Yeah, you think back. I was actually watching last night before I went to bed. I was watching the 30 for 30 about Marcus Dupree, and you think about when he burst onto the scene. Like, you know, what could some of these guys have made in endorsements or any kind of money that is available to them now? And it's kind of mind-boggling. Tim Tebow, I think about in Florida. You know, Todd Gurley. You know, there's so many who were big time players. Kyler Murray was well before that time, won a Heisman, you know, so it would be interesting. You know, they would have their preferences, like, you know, and how much would that play into apparel deals at the school and all that stuff. I'm sure that would all be interesting to find out. But I think it's cool. I think it's cool that these guys get to be the face of these deals and get to actually have some personality and be involved in this stuff. They get to do commercials. I know everybody talked about Arch Manning's performance on the field, but he's in commercials. He was in a Warby Parker commercial, and he's doing Red Bull stuff and stuff. It's kind of cool. I like, you know, Quinn Ewers did last year, did the Dr. Pepper commercial. I thought it was pretty funny and pretty cool. So I do appreciate this because it's different than seeing, no offense to the guy, but it's different than seeing Peyton Manning endorse every product known to man, or Shaquille O'Neal to endorse every product known to man. So it's nice to have some spice and variety in the different athletes we have out there now.
Yeah, I mean, think about Vince Young. I mean, the list can go on, but yeah, Vince Young, I mean, and we could name thousands of others, but we hit on a lot of them there, and just very cool. So, yeah, BYU set up really well at quarterback moving forward. It's a Thursday, Sam, so it's kind of time to start looking ahead more than looking back, but I do want to at least touch on last week since we talked so much about going into it. Clearly there's 1,000 things that you could talk about, but what most stuck with you from week one, good, bad, or otherwise?
I mean, obviously we alluded to the Arch Manning performance in the opener was probably the biggest thing. I think everybody's watching that. I was tuned in closely on LSU and Clemson, and definitely impressed with the way LSU came in there and won that game. And to me, there was a clear difference between the two quarterbacks. I thought Garrett Nussmeier looked like a pro and look like a guy who you want in that situation. Kate Klubnik, who we had a lot of hype and expectation for him coming in, didn't look that way. Looked like a little bit skittish and running out of open pockets and sped up in his decision making and just not what you expect. Dabo Swinney touched on that earlier this week, but that was interesting. The way TCU looked on Monday night, I expected them to win. I expected them to cover. I don't know that I expected them to do what they did, which is just absolutely handle North Carolina. And I didn't think coming in that North Carolina's roster was all that great. I know that there's some of the takes that I liked. I like Gio Lopez and Kamori House and a few others, but for most of it, I just didn't love what the roster looked like after there was so much turnover. And TCU's roster, on the other hand, in my opinion, looks as good as it has since 2022. Like this is clearly a roster to me that's more cohesive, faster, more physical than any of the last 2 years worth of teams. Definitely better than the 23 team, definitely better than the 24 team. And now all of a sudden I think you see them as they're absolutely going to be a factor in this conference if that's the way they're going to play every week, because they play with an edge. I think Josh Hoover, the way he delivered the ball, didn't surprise me. We had him really high in our quarterback rankings, but I think the nation got to learn a little bit about Josh Hoover and kind of how talented he is. And when you add the physical run game that they had and the speed they have on the edge, I think they're going to be a really, really impressive team. And the last guy was JKS at California. The true freshman to start and to look that way, I was not sure what to expect from him, but to see him throw the football, my goodness, like that guy, I think he completed his first 9 passes, and he was not off target very much in that game at all. And I am excited to see what Cal looks like the rest of the season, but He is a really good quarterback, and I'm excited to see him as a true freshman grow and sprout.
Yeah, Jaron Kiave Sangapolutele. I've practiced that.
Good job. I'm still working on it. I was trying to work on it the other day, and I'm still getting the hang of it. So I'm not confident enough to say it just yet.
JKS is great. It's perfect for everybody, at least starting out, as we all try to figure out how to put respect on his name, because you're right, man. He was great. Bunch of honors this week, and he makes you look at Cal in a totally different way, I think, moving forward as well.
Yeah, no doubt. It's and so many people when Devin Brown transferred over there, the former Ohio State quarterback who was battling for the starting job last year, I think a lot of people, including us, assumed that Devin Brown was going to win that job. And so for JKS to win that out of the gate told you what they thought of him. But now then you look at how he played, it's very clear where they are. And now you look at Cal is maybe they're a factor in the ACC, because we look at they lost so much in the portal. They lost Jack injuries. They lost Jaden Knott. They lost some offensive linemen. They lost a lot of guys. But I'll give Ron Rivera and the Justin Wilcox and the coaching staff a lot of credit. Like they're a team that looked way better than Oregon State that night. And I'm intrigued to see how much of a factor it can be in the ACC this year.
So part of the fun of these first couple of weeks is getting all these crossover matchups and league bragging rights and things like that. I think the way I set it up, SEC, even with the two big high-profile losses, still pretty much reigns supreme. Big Ten, the big Ohio State win over Texas was the highlight there. Big 12 saved some face. TCU really bailed them out there. With just the Utah win being the other big deal. But we got some more coming up this weekend. ACC had some big wins, but then a bunch of losses. But we get more on that little crossover report card coming up this weekend. How are you feeling about Oklahoma and Michigan? Mateer, great debut. Bryce Underwood, great debut. What are you expecting in this game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating. I definitely going to be a test for Michigan, because as good as Bryce Underwood looked, and I thought he looked really sharp against New Mexico, it was against New Mexico. It was a home game. So you're sending a true freshman on the road in a difficult atmosphere for his first start. That is without question going to be a challenge. And against the Brent Venables defense, by the way. So that's going to be its own beast to deal with. But I would definitely give Oklahoma a little bit of the edge. I think they're a little bit more explosive offensively in my mind. Between these two teams, I think Bryce is going to be a star and he's going to get there, but you're going up against a quarterback and an offensive coordinator who are pretty experienced, pretty salty. And I think this is going to be a game where I think Oklahoma's probably, and I know Michigan's got a really good defense, but I think this is a game where it's going to be a little bit difficult to keep pace with Oklahoma, especially at home. So I think they're about 5.5 point favorites. I kind of like them covering that number. But I do think it's going to be fun to watch Underwood continue to grow and Mateer to see if he can continue to live up to all the preseason hype that preceded him.
I mean, had you watched a lot of him before last Saturday? Because I know a lot of people hadn't. I mean, Oklahoma fans have clearly gone on YouTube before I did with the Earl Campbell Award stuff. I follow all the Texas guys. So I was like, man, this kid out there at Pullman's lighting it up, but they play so damn late. I don't know who's noticing it, but yeah, how well aware were you of him? And obviously you had big expectations, but it seems like at least for 1 week, he's met them.
Yeah. Last season, it was more of like just trying to figure out who he was, because it was like, oh, who's the guy that took over for Cam Ward after Cam Ward left? And then you started seeing some of the numbers. I remember they played Texas Tech early, and then, he starts putting up these crazy numbers, and they would be on the CW. And so, I would turn it on every now and then and check it out. And then when we got closer to the end of the season, I started diving in a little bit more, because you started hearing, he might get in the portal. He might, especially when Ben Arbuckle moved on and moved to Oklahoma, it's like, oh, well, you figured that was going to be inevitable. So I started diving in a little bit, and I spent a lot of time in the winter watching him. And, we ended up ranking the portal quarterbacks and to rank how good the transfers were. And he was at the top of the list initially for us, just because the dual threat ability, like he could fire it in there as a passer, but when he took off, it added a new element. And the other thing that struck me too was they had an offense that was a lot of fun, a lot of fast wide receivers, some good running backs. They had a really good attack last year at Wazoo. And so I was impressed by him a lot. I didn't know how well he's going to transition to SEC, and we're going to have to wait and see what he looks like against those types of defenses. But from a skill standpoint and from an ability standpoint, there's not a lot of questions. I mean, I know he's a guy that was lightly recruited out of Texas high schools, but you see the talent there. I think it's there. I think it's legitimate. And I think the fact that he was able to go with his OC makes it that much smoother of a transition.
Yeah, definitely a very exciting start. And I'm trying to like downplay my expectations and not get too excited. It almost kind of bums people like, dude, how excited are you about John Mateer? And I'm like, I'm just the dude that does like the opposite, almost like a reverse psychology. But it's going to be hard to contain excitement watching him because he is just so dynamic. You mentioned the SEC there, and without getting into all of their games, the huge storyline last week was Alabama and Kalen DeBoer, obviously. How much are you buying the downfall at this point, Sam, or is this just classic week one overreaction?
I will tell you, I try not to overreact to those instances, but man, it's hard for me to not shake the image of how much more physical and how much more edge Florida State played with on Saturday. And that's what I can't get over, because I do think, and I was high on Alabama coming in because the roster talent is substantial. They have one of the best rosters in the country. But to get handled like that at FSU, it to me is a really rough sign. So they've got a couple of weeks before they play an SEC team. I don't think they don't play Georgia until the end of the month, but they've got a lot of work to do. I will say this: he did show at times the ability to get this team to bounce back. There were times when I think last year you thought, they had a setback and maybe they would be left for dead. I mean, they lost the Vanderbilt game. They came back and beat South Carolina the week after. They lost the Oklahoma game. They came back and beat Auburn the week after. So he has shown Kalen DeBoer has shown a propensity for getting that team off the mat. But to me, just because of the buzz and the noise that happens, because Alabama fans and Alabama donors are not used to this. They are not used to being a team that gets beaten like this. And because it's not Saban, and it's not in Saban we trust because he's not there anymore, they're still very much judging this guy. And so it is even though I'm not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater with Alabama, I do think these next few weeks are really critical for him, because I think in these types of situations in college football, if you don't right the ship quickly, that narrative can just blow you over. It can just really overwhelm you and your program if you don't nip it in the bud. So I think it's really important for them to be crisp and clean. I know they got ULM this week, but they got to come out crisp, clean, and make it easy, make it look academic, handle their business, and then go rolling in a few weeks to Georgia and looking like a much different team.
So for those that don't know, Sam is the Texpert. So he's one of the go-tos when talking Texas college football. And there's a couple of really intriguing games featuring in-state schools this week. Texas State and UTSA. A rivalry that I don't know nationally how much play it really gets, Sam, but G.J. Kinney and Jeff Traylor with a lot of familiarity with one another, obviously former coach and player relationship. But the I-35 rivalry, G.J. Kinney saying in his press conference, he was wondering, like, why is there not – what was it, an ESPN broadcast? Like, this is going to be, hopefully one of the best games in the country. I was like, it's kind of got a good point. I'm looking at the schedule. There's some pretty good games, but I could see where you could make some room for UTSA, Texas State. But how much does this game intrigue you? Do you think it's getting enough love, I guess, where it needs to? And what do you expect out of this matchup this time around? Because last year was a little ugly.
Yeah, I expect it's going to be a lot better than we saw last year. I was shocked at how lopsided last year's match was, but I'm very intrigued just because I thought both teams played well last week. Texas State, I thought, looked pretty sharp against Eastern Michigan and handled them pretty well. Brad Jackson in his starting debut looked sharp. I heard a lot of good stuff about him this offseason, about not just his mobility, but his ability as a passer. I think there's a sense that he is the type of talent that if he goes and kills it this year, there's going to be Power 4 programs circling the waters trying to get him to transfer in the winter. So I'm really intrigued by him. And then Owen McCown, for my money, I think is the best quarterback in the American Athletic Conference. I think definitely one of the better ones in the country. And they gave Texas A&M a lot to handle on Saturday night. And I love the way they ran the football. I love the way they attacked and they played hard. This team definitely started a lot faster this year than they did last year. I thought last year they were so slow out of the gate. First year post Frank Harris, it was just not. It took them a while to get their footing. And This year, you can tell they're sharper. They're playing a lot with a lot more edge, a lot more discipline. And so I think this is going to be a fun one. I think the last time they played Alamo Dome, if I remember correctly, they drew well over 40,000. So excited to see if they can push that number even higher and have a really good atmosphere. But I've seen the trash talking on my timeline between UTSA fans and Texas State fans, and I love it. I'm excited for this one because I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was 6 meetings, and it was all UTSA up until last year when 49-10, GJ Kinney and the Bobcats put it on the Roadrunners there. But yeah, there is some buildup. If you're in the state of Texas, I think Twitter's like putting it on your timeline because so many people are kind of buzzing about it. But that's going to be a lot of fun. Another one in the Lone Star State on the hilltop, SMU and Baylor. The last time these two teams met, SMU was in such a different place. Nowhere would anybody have predicted they'd be an ACC school when those two teams met up again years and years later. And not only that, but fresh off a college football playoff appearance, for goodness sakes. This is a big game just for kind of territory and bragging rights and whatnot. What do you think of the game and the matchup, and how badly do you think Dave Aranda kind of needs this one, Sam? Because I don't know if you're aware of this stat, but Baylor has not won a top 25 game since that 2021 season. And so they're a little bit of a drought here, a big opportunity against the now-ranked Mustangs. But do you see them breaking that streak, or do you think Rhett Lashley and company are going to have more of that Auburn flavor for the Bears?
Yeah, I kind of like this one for Baylor, even though they're on the road, just because I think there's a lot more returning talent for Baylor. And what hurt them last week against Auburn from a run game standpoint, I don't know if I'm there yet on SMU, because Kevin Jennings is not, even though he is a really good athlete, he is not the style of quarterback that Jackson Arnold is. So I don't think you're going to see Kevin Jennings on the zone read or shooting it up the middle off of jet motion like Jackson Arnold was doing with Eric Singleton. I just don't think you're going to see that. That's not Kevin Jennings' game. His game is more, I'm going to throw it downfield or I'm going to scramble to throw. So he is a run threat. He'll get some first downs, but he's not going to be carrying the ball 15 times for 130 yards or whatever it was that Jackson Arnold did. So with that, if the run game is not as much of a threat, I do like Baylor's chance a lot more. Also because I just think offensively this is a really good football team. You saw, I thought, Sawyer Robertson. I know there was a little bit rough around the edges a little bit. For the most part, though, I thought they threw the football really well. You like what you saw from Michael Trigg. You like what you saw from Josh Cameron, the receiving game. I think this is a really talented offensive set of skill players for Baylor, and I think they're going to be able to score with just about anybody they play. And so I think that this one, I think, is not quite a pick 'em. I think SMU's favored by a little bit, but I really think that this is a really good opportunity for Baylor. And I think you're right. From a narrative standpoint, I think it's really important for Dave Aranda and Baylor because they had the good season last year and they turned it around after, kind of being on the brink at the end of 2023. But if you start 0-2, that's not good. And I think it's really important from a narrative standpoint that Baylor rights the ship. But it's going to be a really good, interesting, compelling matchup for two teams who I think are both going to be competing in their conference.
I wasn't going to include this game on the same level of those, but Houston and Rice this weekend, I was more curious about why are they not going to play moving forward? What's kind of the backstory there as to why this Bayou bucket is wrapping up for those that not following along with those two?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it. I'll say as someone who's grew up here and, went to versus Houston and I've attended a lot of these games. I love it. I know it's not a really important rivalry in the national landscape, but it is between the FBS schools. It is the closest distance between two rivals in the FBS. They're only about 4 miles apart. And I always had fun going to them. I get the sense part of it is we schedule these things way out in advance, which is silly. And ADs continue to do that even though we shouldn't. But I seem to get the sense that I don't think I've not gotten the sense that Houston really wants to continue it. I get the sense that Rice would like to continue playing it, but for whatever reason, there isn't as much momentum on the Houston side to continue playing it. And I can't say I understand why, because to me, I think you're going to have a G5 on your schedule moving forward if you Houston anyway. Maybe one or two, you have a G5, an FCS, and a Power 4. I don't understand why Rice couldn't be that G5. It doesn't have to be every year. but maybe I would at least make it regular. And the next few years, I think they've got Southern, Georgia Southern, they've got Oregon State, they've got LSU. I think it plays Houston in a few years. You know, they've got a random smattering of opponents. Sam Houston's in there somewhere. I think Boise State's in there somewhere. So they've got a lot of those opponents there. But they, to me, both of these parties have not done a good enough of a job trying to keep it alive. And in this instance, at this current time, it seems to me that Houston is kind of the less motivated of the two to keep it going, which is unfortunate. We saw this happen with TCU and SMU also. TCU, when they're now in the Big 12, and I remember it was like a year or two ago that they said, well, we want to schedule more like a team that makes the playoff or whatever, and they want to have the extra home game, so they're going to take that extra home game. I don't know if that's what plays into it here for Houston. It's very possible it does, but I still don't understand that, because even if it's a road game at Rice, it's right down the street, and a lot of your fans show up anyway. So I think a lot of it has to do, but some of it I'm sure has to do with gate money and how much bring in for tickets for a game like that. But I hope that they reconsider that and we get this going, because this is the last one for at least the next 5 years. Because I think the non-conference schedule games that Houston has are up through 2031, and the Rice is not on it. So I hope that changes in your future, because I really do like this series.
Sam, final thing for you, not quite as jam-packed of a schedule as last week when you had all of these teams with numbers next to their names playing other teams with numbers next to their names. But there are some intriguing matchups. Michigan, Oklahoma, obviously, we started off talking about that. Illinois, Duke, I find intriguing. Cyhawk, obviously, Iowa State and Iowa. Oak State, Oregon. Just Oak State's in a weird spot right now, and you have the talk back and forth, at least spicing that up a little bit this week. Arizona State at Mississippi State, and there's some other games out there. My question is, what game that we have not touched on or talked about of those, perhaps, or maybe one that I didn't mention, is kind of going to be the game that you're looking forward to most this week?
I'm really interested in Florida and USF on Saturday afternoon, because I think Florida's a good team, and we know how difficult their schedule is. They've got one of the best quarterbacks in the country, best young quarterbacks in the country, in DJ Lagway. But USF, on their opener against Boise State, absolutely handled the Broncos. And what impressed me most about them was how fast that roster is. Like, there is speed all over the field on that roster. And I had done some reporting earlier this month that, asking around about roster budgets in the American Athletic Conference, and USF is up there. From what I understand, the class of that conference with a football roster budget in the 8 to 10 million range, which is well above what most G5s have. And they are trying to compete at a high level. And so I had heard that this off season. And then when I watched them play on last Thursday, I was like, oh, yeah, they did do a good job with their roster, because there are dudes all over the place. And, Byron Brown made his return to the lineup, talented quarterback. He's redone his throwing motions, a little funky, but he's also a good runner. And so he made some plays for him. So that's one. And again, those in-state battles, when you get an in-state G5 against the Power 4 program, there's always a little bit of extra spice to those, because there's that underdog mentality, and the G5 team really wants to knock them off. And the Power 4 program thinks they're above, the G5 program and all that stuff. So there's a lot of dynamics in those types of in-state games. So that's one that I had circled on for Saturday that I'm really intrigued to watch, just because if USF hangs around, not really great for Billy Napier, but I think USF is good enough to hang around with them for a little while.
Hey, man, as always, we greatly appreciate your time. I understand how busy this time of year especially is, so thanks for taking a good chunk out to spend with us and talk some college football. You can find him at SCon Jr. on Twitter, and, of course, on theathletic.com as well. Sam, talk to you in a few days, man. Enjoy the weekend, and appreciate you as always.
Thanks so much. Take care. Have a good one.